Hello, guys, and welcome back to our SBL series for your ACCA exams for the December 2025 attempt. Now, what we had started off was with a discussion on corporate reporting, and we are going to take that discussion ahead and bring it to a nice little conclusion. What we have to study today is economic activity and environmental impact. Now, see, today when we are talking about a topic like economic activity and its connection with environmental impact, you have to understand that this is not, one of your EVS type discussions that you used to do in school. This is a real phenomena, which is, of course, super critical from an examination point of view, but even in the real business world. See, the reality is simple. Any economic activity that you talk about, be it production of cars, generating electricity, running a factory, delivering food by Swiggy and Zomato, or Mintra, or clothes manufacturing, whatever it is, these activities, they consume resources and leave an environmental footprint. Now, this environmental footprint is mostly in the form of resources getting consumed and the fact that we might not have adequate resources for the future generations to carry on their needs. As accountants, as strategists, as future business leaders, we are no longer expected to just count the profits or the wealth generation. We must also evaluate the impact on people, planet, and long term sustainability, the very essence of triple bottom line. And it's not just theory. Even in India, companies like Tata Steel, Infosys, Reliance, they are publishing detailed sustainability reports, right? And it's not something which is happening in isolation. It's not just in India. On the global level, Unilever, Tesla, Apple, Starbucks, they are integrating environmental accountability into their business models. And as as future business leaders, ACCA wants you to show that same level of awareness in your answers. Now, what they are saying is, see, somewhere at the core, what is economic activity? Production and distribution of goods and services through which, we measure the overall volume of economic output. Now, there are different ways, and, in your 11th and 12th standard economics, you must have understood how to calculate national income, GDP, GNP, NNP, so on and so forth. But before we dive any further, let's understand what exactly is economic activity. I mean, is it something that most of you don't know the meaning to? The answer is no. Of course, you know the meaning to the term economic activity. And at its core, what is that? It is production and distribution of goods and services. We measure it through GDP at a national level, but underneath, it's about money flows, consumption, labor, energy, raw material, all moving through the system. Inputs like raw material, water, energy, human effort, outputs like finished products, waste, emission, pollution. So every activity, it consumes resources. So that is one aspect. So, the resources in the economy are getting depleted. And on the other hand, that output, see, the final product that the customers will be using, that is one thing. But, you're also talking about waste, you're talking about emissions, you're talking about pollution, you're talking about all these things, right? And somewhere that brings us to the fact that not only are we causing pollution, but we are also leading to a rapid decline in the overall quantum of resources. Even renewable resources face depletion when usage exceeds regeneration rates. When I talk about renewable resources, I'm talking about wind energy, I'm talking about solar energy. I mean, solar energy is good and solar energy is in abundance, but you need basically a processing mechanism to convert solar energy into electricity. Now, just saying that there is abundant sunlight, which means there is limitless energy supply, is not the solution. You need solar panels to convert solar energy into electricity. And if you don't have enough solar panels, then naturally there is going to be a cap on resource generation. For example, even something like fishing activity. I mean, fish keeps on getting regenerated, new fish are born, but if the rate of fish catching or consumption is more than the rate of fish regeneration, then naturally that resource is also getting depleted. And see, different products follow different life cycle paths. Some are consumed immediately, some are discarded after use, and some are used for a relatively longer duration of time, right? So it's you will have to look at each item separately and not just look at it from an environmental perspective, but what impact it has on the finances of the company, I mean, if you have to kind of do a decommissioning cost payment towards the end, where you have to do a landfill, or you have to participate in, for example, some activity like making good the damage caused to the ocean floor or afforestation, so all of these will involve some sort of a cost at your end. It will involve some sort of an effort and an expense at your end. See, right now, if I look at it, something like the European Union, for example, it has now mandated that 90% of end of life vehicles must be reused or recycled. I mean, compare this with India, where electronic waste recycling is still in early stages. See, there are companies which are doing it, but not everyone. I mean, forget electronic waste, even physical waste, like batteries that are used in cars. I have seen so many of them, being thrown on the side of the road. And see, those still contain toxic material. So there will be soil pollution, animals will be impacted. So we are a far cry from e-waste disposal. We are still dealing somewhere with how to tackle the physical waste that is getting disposed of. And see, there is going to be a limitation on how much waste can you handle. Very recently, I was listening to an interview of the Chief Minister of Delhi, and one journalist very cheekily asked her, what are these? So when you drive outside Delhi, there are these huge mounds of garbage, okay? There's literally garbage piled on top of each other from all over the city. And see, when you drive and when you look at it from a distance, you feel, there's some small hill. But as you go closer by, I'm telling you, it becomes difficult for you to even breathe. I mean, the stench is enough to honestly make someone collapse and make that person unconscious. It's that strong a smell. Now imagine that garbage getting piled on day in and day out is an invitation to diseases. It's, of course, spoiling the city. It's creating so much pollution. And that is in a way what we mean by environmental footprint. I mean, we don't know how to dispose of waste, and Delhi chief minister was saying ki, what, the previous governments did nothing, and waste generation is 100 and waste processing capacity is only 40. Now imagine if you don't have the right waste processing capacity, what happens to biomedical waste? If there are no incinerators, then just imagine the amount of diseases that can spread in that process. And this ecological footprint, this environmental footprint, we are not talking enough about it. It's having far-reaching impacts on everyone, and something that we should be super careful about. But how exactly do we measure environmental footprint? It is the total impact of an organization's resource use, waste, and emission. Historically, growth is more higher growth means a more impactful environmental footprint. See, technology is helping companies reduce that. I mean, just imagine the number of hard copy letters that would be printed and sent by one individual to another. But on the other hand, today you have emails which have made your life easier. I mean, you don't have to send letters, you are saving on so much cost on that front. But then on the other hand, there are other challenges involved with the use of technology. I mean, think of Tesla. What Tesla has done is they have redefined the automobile industry with electric vehicles. Though battery disposal is still a problem. I mean, I was talking about the batteries on the side of the road. I have seen one, very interesting use of batteries. So, what they do is they remove all the contents of the battery, and then it's like a big, heavy container. They put soil in it and they grow plants. But I don't know how much of the toxins actually get removed, and is it even safer to grow plants there? One doesn't know. I will see Indian Railways is also electrifying routes to reduce dependence on fossil fuels. But what is getting used to generate that electricity? If you are again using thermal power, then it's like you are not burning coal in the train, but you are burning coal in the power plant. So it's basically one and the same. And footprints are, and these footprints, they are measured using different approaches. Like, some of them could be measured in terms of, the global hectare, which compares human demand to Earth's capacity to regenerate. And when I'm talking about the environmental footprint growth dynamics, I should know that I have to look at it through a three-tier lens in a certain way. When I talk about traditional growth, companies' growth meant larger environmental footprints because the higher the level of activity, the more is the pollution, the more is the impact. But technological innovations and sustainable materials have been able to reduce footprints while growing their operations. I was at a hotel. I mean, I was traveling very recently and I was at a hotel and they were that, I mean, the focus of that hotel was sustainable hospitality. I'm talking about ITC. Now, they pride themselves on being, pioneers of sustainable hospitality in India. Another reason why, a lot of the eyes in the stock market are focused on how ITC Hotels is going to take things from here because they are opening a lot of properties and they are, s- so to say, they are promoting environmentally healthy practices, reducing wastage, and all of that. So somewhere these innovations are helping companies, gain their footing back. But see, companies will still need, they still are in the nascent stages. They need to go a real long way because when I'm talking about the environmental impact, we are on the one hand we are talking about consumption where usage of resources is leading to depletion in the environment, and on the other hand we are talking about emission, which is producing and discharging pollutants into the environment, including air, water, and soil contamination. Now, talking about specific environmental impacts, air quality, people like me living in Delhi, NCR region, of course, they will tell you how horrible the weather, I mean, how horrible all this pollution has created, what kind of an impact it has. I mean, I'm not even kidding. Around a year ago, maybe, in the month of November, I'm not sure. I stepped out in my balcony in the morning, I thought, the weather is nice. And when I stepped out, I saw black particles floating in the air. And I was like, this is very unusual. Why am I seeing black particles? Have my eyes not opened fully? And then I realized, no, this is pollution. These are particles floating in the air. Now imagine you breathe that air and what kind of physical damage you're causing to yourself. I mean, look at water resources and how irrationally they have been polluted. I mean, every time I cross the Yamuna River, which I do very, very frequently because I stay close to it, when I look at the river and I feel, is it a river or is it, what in a vernacular Hindi we call Nala? I mean, what is it? Is it like some cheap canal which has been polluted with effluents, or is it like a river which honestly has so much religious and other significance also? Now, imagine people who are consuming the water that comes from Yamuna. I mean, what health risks are we exposing these people to? Talking about climate change, I mean, climate change is real. This year, we saw some of the worst uh, rainfall patterns which damaged crops, which damaged, social gatherings. Of course, social gatherings is secondary, but it claimed lives of people. There were floods, and that is climate change for you. It is very much real. And again, talking about soil, the last one is we are talking about soil pollution. Now, who would have thought that the soil can get polluted? Now imagine excessive use of chemical fertilizers or battery acids contaminating the soil, and then that land becomes barren, and after that you do anything you want to do with it, but it will never get back to its fertile state. So we are at a juncture where we cannot take any of this lightly. I mean, when I'm talking about environmental impact, I mean, think of a company which has invited to tender for a new road construction contract. While infrastructure brings economic benefits, environmental impacts must be carefully evaluated. I mean, constructing a road will generate jobs, will generate consumption and production in the economy. But what impact does it have on the environment? Imagine, I mean, I was in Missouri some 6 months ago. I know they were constructing a road, and it was cutting right through the mountains. So just imagine the amount of vegetation that has been lost. And news of landslides and all of these are not rare these days. Imagine that somebody is literally breaking down parts of a mountain in order to construct a road, and naturally it won't be able to sustain the weight and it will fall and cave under its own pressure, and then causing landslides and loss of lives and biodiversity and whatnot. So naturally, the environmental impacts need to be understood. You will need an idea on what exactly does or what implications does each of your action have, and how can you protect the environment, how can you minimize the damage that you are causing to the environment. Right. And see, at this point, it's critical to know how exactly do we measure environmental footprint. I mean, the one method that we do know of is the global hectares method. Environmental footprint can be summarized by the equivalent area of land needed to assimilate the effect measured in global hectares. This normalized measure helps calculate how much faster resources are used than they can regenerate, providing a clear sustainability metric. So on one hand, I'm consuming 100 units and I'm producing only 80. So there will come a point where all the material will get completely exhausted, even the one in the warehouse and stores. And then what will you do? How will the future generations meet their needs? And these are critical questions we must be asking ourselves. See, environmental impact and environmental footprint. See, it's not a measure of sustainability, but it tells you how far are we consuming resources and within how much time, we fall short of resources, so we can measure or we can decide the next steps going forward. Now, the how is the environmental footprint determined? The population size, consumption per person, and resource intensity. I was in Kolkata very recently, and I'm sure you have read this in your geography books that West Bengal and Kolkata in specific has some of the, or rather, it has the highest population density. That is, number of people living per square kilometer. Now, imagine if there are those many people, there is that much more pollution. If you are measuring pollution in, you're measuring the resource allocation and consumption and the pollution in total, you should also understand how much is the consumption per person. See, that will reflect their lifestyle choices, that will reflect, their attitude towards wasting material or conservation of material. And the amount of consumption per person will also help us to decide what is the potential pollution that might be caused, along with the intensity of using resources. The efficiency of resource use in providing goods and services determines the footprint per unit of consumption. I mean, I often give this example when I'm teaching PM that, when my mother wants to use 250 grams of wheat flour, she will use exactly 250 grams of wheat flour because, she's efficient at her job. She's quite an expert. But if somebody tells me, what, Satyamet, put 250 grams of wheat flour, while I'm taking it out of the container, measuring it, I will spill something will fall off, and only 250 grams will enter the production process, but around 50-60 grams will get wasted, which means the pattern of utilization and the efficiency of utilization make a lot of impact. And if you are efficient, the wastage is naturally lower. Organize it, and taking that concept ahead, we talk about organizational impact categories, where we are talking about paper usage, energy usage, transportation, buildings, and water consumption, and wastewater regeneration. India, even today, hasn't really been able to get over its energy problem. I mean, call it what you want, but even the solar energy projects and other renewable energy projects have not been able to generate enough electricity. I mean, I stay in Noida, and I'm telling you, there are at least 5 times in a day that my electricity supply gets cut off. And Noida is not some rural part, it's very close to the national capital, and this is, where we have been reduced to. We don't have enough energy. We cannot have, we don't have enough energy to run the country. And that is, and if we intensify the production, I mean, there will be a lot more pollution that is caused. So you are walking a very thin line basically here. When we talk about environmental impact and we talk of paper usage, I'm sure you have gone to an ATM, and there they have often told you ki, there's a message that comes on your screen. What does that message say? The message says that, do you really want to print this piece of paper? Because, if you don't print, you are saving the environment. So these things, of course, they do play a role. Then transportation, there is a lot of emphasis on community travel, on people traveling together using public transport instead of using their own vehicles. That can help to reduce pollution. Today buildings are also being constructed in an environmentally friendly pattern, like co- households build household buildings, residential buildings are being encouraged. And why don't you have a solar panel installed at the top of your apartment that will help you in managing the electricity requirements? There is rainwater harvesting and these activities also that are being, considered very, very seriously, because we have now been able to observe the kind of impact these insensitive practices have had. And water consumption or utilization of water, the less said, the better. I mean, there are so many parts of the country which are still not, which still don't receive adequate water supply, clean water supply. And you can think about I think you can infer that it has all been because we haven't used it sparingly and we have caused a lot of wastage. I mean, if we were to talk about the greenhouse gas emissions, I think when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, see the impact they have on the environment is pretty intense. I mean, some of them can lead to challenges in, how the ozone layer functions. And, with so much pollution happening because of release of greenhouse gases like methane and, your this thing carbon dioxide and all of these, which are overall increasing the temperature levels also. So they are also contributing to global warming in many ways. And when we look at an organization, we are looking at the environmental impact, but we are also deeply interested in the social impact assessment framework. See, social impact assessment means analyzing, monitoring, and managing the intended and unintended social consequences of planned interventions. Its primary purpose is creating a more sustainable and equitable biophysical and human environment. I mean, take movies. Why are so many people making a fuss about why Shahid Kapoor in this Kabir Singh, whatever the movie is, I keep on forgetting that name. I think he was shown as a misogynist who would beat up his girlfriend and be abusive towards her. And there was a section of the population which said, you know what, this is setting the wrong example. Then there was a counter argument which said, you know what, but this is entertainment. But do you agree that every 16, 17, 18-year-old or even 22-year-old who's walking on the streets is watching this kind of movie, watching this kind of behavior getting celebrated and trying to replicate that? I mean, what kind of a society are we creating? So that is, that is social impact. And that social impact, I gave an example from a movie, it works for everything. And we need to understand what kind of impact are we creating on the world around us. And for that, the social footprint method, it provides an approach to measuring and reporting social sustainability performance, dealing with impacts on people and communities through the concept of capital created by people. See, social footprint, it helps you to measure and report social sustainability performance, dealing with impacts on people and communities through the concept of arthro. So what anthro capital? What we are trying to say is we need a way to measure what kind of a positive or negative impact are we creating on the society around us. I mean, today we are living in a world where, even advertisements are getting censored because you never know what kind of a message does the addicted population derive from, this kind of messaging. So we have to be very careful. What message are we giving to the world at large? Are we promoting patriarchy? Are we promoting misogyny? Are we trying to promote equal work opportunities and equal pay? So all of these are a part of the socio impact of a business. And when it comes to anthro capital, what was anthro capital? Which is capital created by people. There is human capital, and then there is social capital, and then there is constructed capital. Constructed capital is physical infrastructure, roads, utilities built by people, toll booths and highway booths, and all of that. Social capital is the social network, cohesion, shared interest, mutually held knowledge, democratic activities, and goodwill that strengthen community. Again, what we are trying to say is that, see, the value of an organization does not come only from the output or the wealth that it generates, but what kind of a relationship have you fostered with the participants around you? Have you been able to utilize your position to get certain benefits for them so that you get a more wholehearted support for, continuing your business? And then most important is the human capital, which talks about personal health, knowledge, skills, experience, human rights, and ethical entitlements that contribute to individual well-being and productivity. I mean, think about it. You have entry-level workers who are doing a physical manual labor at your setup, and you don't give that person an adequate lunch break. So again, these are not appropriate working conditions, or sometimes you make them work without a protective mask on your face. And those are also some unfair practices where, where you are exploiting the very essence of these workers and you are getting them to do what you want them to do. Now imagine if this is how human resources are being treated, people will leave not the first opportunity to get out of that setup, because it's far more damaging and it will impact production at some point. So when you are doing your analysis, you should understand what exactly is anthro capital and what is it helping you to achieve and analyze. We did speak about the sustainability development goals, not that we are supposed to learn, but yes, one important point in your discussion is the triple bottom line. Now, this triple bottom line in many ways now has taken the world by storm. Okay. The triple bottom line, triple, that means three aspects are being focused upon. So this theory is all about that. Its triple bottom line is people, planet, and profits. Don't focus just on money, which is the economic aspect. Focus on well-being of the workers, your employees, and the overall society in which you operate. And then think about the planet, because you get only one earth. There's no replacement available where you can shift to. So it is your responsibility to use it in a manner that maintains the ability of the future generations also to meet their needs. And triple bottom line is a good combination of qualitative and quantitative reporting. See, there are certain good parts attached, because you are giving such level of transparency and this level of detailed information, decision making becomes easier. You can make more informed decisions, and you will be able to, with focusing on people, planet, and profits, the customers at large will also start seeing value in what you are doing. And customers these days are more attracted to organizations which are more and more responsible. With people, planet, profits being your primary objectives, I think it won't take long for the customers to align. You could also, through the triple bottom line approach, you could become the leader in your supply chain and encourage other participants in the supply chain to adopt a similar approach. But of course, this method is not without its limitations. There are no standards to measure certain things. It has only limited utility across organizations. Gathering and collating this kind of information is a challenge in itself. And people might not be willing to learn something new, which is, not a problem exclusive only to this. It's basically the problem everywhere. So with that in mind, we are done with the second part of corporate reporting. I will be following this up with the chapter on technology and data analytics. Thank you.